This is the Spycraft 101 podcast. Welcome to your clandestine classroom. This is episode number 223 of the Spycraft 101 podcast. I'm joined today by Sam Farran. Sam moved to the United States from his birthplace in Lebanon and joined the U.S. Marine Corps in 1978. He was later trained as an interrogator and worked on orders with the Defense Intelligence Agency and as an attache officer. After retiring from the Marine Corps, he worked as a civilian contractor all over the Middle East, and in particular in Yemen. In 2015, Sam was captured by Houthi fighters in Sanaa shortly after they took over the capital city. He was held for nearly 6 months before finally being released to return home. I invited Sam onto the podcast to discuss his work all over the Middle East and his months of captivity by the Houthi in Yemen in 2015, which he wrote about in his book, The Tightening Dark, An American Hostage in Yemen, which was published in 2021. But first, let me ask you this. Are you an amateur military historian like me? Has this podcast rekindled your interest in Eastern Europe and the Cold War? Maybe you're finally getting into reenacting and living history just like you've always said you would. If so, you should check out the incredible collection of surplus military goods at Krashiki.com. Chris himself scours the world for the best uniforms and field equipment available and delivers them right to your door. He's got almost anything you can imagine and many things you haven't. Uniforms from East Germany, the Soviet Union, and modern-day Bulgaria, Poland, and Russia are all available. Rucksacks, mess kits, and load-bearing gear are also up on the site right now. The inventory is constantly changing, so you never know what kind of gems you might stumble on, all at very affordable prices. Find it all at Krashiki.com. That's KRUSCHIKI.com. Or just click the link in the show notes of this episode and use the discount code SPYCRAFT101 for 10% off your order. Sam, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I appreciate it. I'm really glad to have the chance to talk to you because we have not really talked very much about recent events in the Middle East here on the podcast. So it seems like you know more about them than just about anybody else out there.
Yes, I do. From my previous job and knowing what goes behind the curtains, it's amazing what the media shows and what is really going behind the closed doors with the politics of all of it.
I believe it. Yeah. And it was a great insider look at so much of what went on, like the National Dialogue Conference, which I'm sure that we'll talk about later on. But all of that was brand new to me. It was a real learning opportunity for me reading your book.
Thanks.
So I want to go back to your story. Can you just tell me a little bit about growing up in Lebanon in the town of Tebneen before you even came to the U.S.?
Yes, I was born in Tebneen. It's approximately about 20 kilometers north of the Israeli border, which I just came back about 3-4 days ago. I was there actually fixing up my retirement house that was damaged from the bombings by Israel. But I was born there in my grandfather's house. I was the first grandchild born there. And I was living in that back then. It's a village, beautiful village. Now it's grown to be, it's still a village, but it's grown in triple size, people building and all of that. Living there, Friday markets that I still attend to this day. Beautiful people, food, and just the atmosphere. It still has the atmosphere of a village, nice, quiet, beautiful scenery, fresh air, all of that. Was born there, lived there for about 3 years. Then we moved to Beirut for about 4 years. I didn't live much in Lebanon, just 7 years of my early life before moving on with my dad and my mom, getting a contract to another country.
Okay. So what was it that took your family all the way over to Libya after that?
My father is a contractor. He was a building contractor, and he got a contract to go to Libya. And so we moved there in 1968. I was 7 years old, and we moved to Derna and then to Benghazi after Gaddafi took over in 69. And he turned all of the private property into, socialism. And so my dad stopped working as a contractor there, and we moved to Libya and opened up a restaurant, our first restaurant business in Benghazi. We stayed there for another 2 years because of what was going on, deteriorating situation, especially against the foreigners. So my mother decided to come to the United States to visit her brothers she have not met
Oh,
before.
wow.
Yeah, our family generation, our family, my great grandfather came here in 1916, and then my grandfather came during the Depression, and he got married and had a child. And during the Depression, he decided to go back to Lebanon, and his family was supposed to follow him, but his wife and my uncle decided not to and stayed here. So he went back and he started his new family in Tibnin, actually. So my mother never met, or any of my other uncles and aunts never met my uncle who was in the States. So she decided to come during, the situation that was getting worse. And that's when she came, and she was like, from the second day she was here, she sent a message back to my father in Libya and said, "We're coming to the United States."
Wow, first impression was a good one then, huh?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So I guess you were still very young at that time. It must have been a even much bigger cultural shock for you than it was from Lebanon to Libya, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, it was. But you adapt real quick as a young child. So, working with the family, working with a restaurant, we went through some very, very rough time there. I can still remember and imagine vividly how bad it was. But thank God that we had an escape from that situation to a better living in the United States.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's a wonderful opportunity, and you took full advantage of it. It sounds like, and you get your whole extended family there now. So, what led you to join the Marine Corps a few years later? What was the impetus for that?
The Marine Corps hymn, from the halls of
Hmm.
Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Well, that Tripoli itself is, the Tripoli in Libya.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
we went, yeah. So we went to Tripoli to pick up our immigration papers, our immigration visas. And back then, still now, of course, MSG is Marine Security Guard. They're the ones who safeguard everything at the embassies, American embassies all over the world. But back then, they were also, the first person you would see at the gate of the embassy. We used to stand out there in dress blues. So when we went to pick up our immigration paper, as I'm walking up the steps to the embassy, and there's this, back then to me, looked like about a 7 foot tall Marine in dress blues, and uniform, the dress blues, how beautiful they are. And I'm just looking at him in awe, and I'm saying to myself, wow, I want to be that.
Hmm.
And when we came to America, it always stuck in my mind. I was 17 years old. As soon as I became a senior in high school, I started checking out. I wanted to join the military. And right away, the only thing that kept sticking in my mind, that 7 foot guy in them dress blues, and that's what I wanted to be.
Man.
And so I went and joined at 17. Of course, when the time came for my parents to sign the papers, it was hell. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It
You have to
was
get their
it,
sign off.
it
Yep.
was hell from my mother,
Hmm.
not my dad. My dad was like super, super proud.
Hmm.
And it was like, okay, they came after, I took the ASVAB test and everything. The recruiter, as staff sergeant, came to the restaurant that we had over here in the US in Dearborn, and they didn't know what a military guy looked like. He comes in uniform, and they thought it was a police officer, that I'm in trouble
Oh
again.
my gosh.
Yeah. And then he introduced himself, and I laid it out that he's the military Marine. They didn't know United States Marine from the Army or that.
Hmm.
All they knew is the military. And my mom went berserk, and she was like throwing a fit. And my dad is, holding her and taking her back to the kitchen and telling her, "Don't worry, he ain't going nowhere. He ain't going nowhere. He's not going to join the military. He ain't going nowhere." But I could see him looking at me and winking, you know. And then he comes out, and the recruiter explains to him, and my dad sitting there with glowing eyes. I thought he would. There was no way that he was gonna do it either, but he did. He signed that paper with full pride, and he was like, "I'm very proud of this." And I still remember to this day how proud he was, signing, my enlistment papers after I came back from boot camp. He made me wear my dress blues every single day to go visit family, friends, or
Oh,
whatever.
wow.
Yeah, showing me off in my dress blues.
That's fantastic. It's funny to think too that for that Marine security guard back in Tripoli, it was just a normal duty day for him, and he probably had no idea that he was, steering the course of your whole life for you just by standing there on
Ab-
duty and looking good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I still look back, even now talking about it, I still remember his face, and I wonder where he's at.
Fantastic. Very cool stuff. So, what was your enlistment like then? What did you end up signing up to do?
Well, I wanted to be actually what's called a aircraft mechanic. And so that was 4 year enlistment. And I didn't want to do 4 years. I only wanted to do 3 years. I didn't know I was going to end up 30, but I wanted to only do three
hmm
years. And so he said, no, with 3 years, you have three options. I said, okay. He said, open contract and see your luck, grunt, or cook. And I'm like, what? And he said, that's the three options you have for 3 years. And it's like, oh boy, I definitely don't want to be a cook. I'm getting out of here because of the
Mm.
restaurant business. It's okay to be a grunt. That's the backbone of the Marine Corps. But humping all day it's like, oh boy. So I said, I'll take my chances and go on the open contract. And lucky for me, I got assigned to be an engineer, heavy equipment operator.
Hmm.
So I did that, went to Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri for school, engineer school, and did my 3 years and 3 months. I had to extend 3 months because I wanted to extend in Japan. And
Oh, yeah.
so,
Who
yeah,
wouldn't?
yeah, I went on a 1 year to
hmm
Iwakuni. It was my first assignment. And I loved it so much that first I extended 6 months, then I extended a year because if they had at that time, they had like incentives. If you extend for a year overseas, you get 15 days of additional leave back home or 30 days in the Pacific and, stuff like
hmm
that, or $50 extra a month, $50 back there. It was good money in
hmm
1980s, 80, 81. So I extended and took the 30 days of their leave and then came back to Camp Pendleton for the last 6 months of my tour for 3 years and 3 months of active duty.
Okay. So, after that first tour, did you go straight into the reserves, or was that like a decision that you made later on?
Oh no, no, right away. The first, I left. I didn't want to get out of the Marine Corps, but my father wasn't doing too well, and we had two businesses going, and my brothers and my sister were not helping out very well. I mean, and so he was asking me to come back and take over the business just to get it straightened out. So to me, I thought, I said, you know what? I have a cousin who did that. He joined the Marine Corps, then he got out for like about a year, didn't like it and went back in and ended up staying 20 years. And so I said, you know what? I'll come out. And once I get it straightened out, I can always come back in. But to do that, I said, what I'm going to do is go straight into the reserve right away. As soon as I got home, I called up the reserve center because I still had 3 years of what's called inactive reserve. So I said that I might as well be active reserve and continue. And if I decide to come back, I know it's easier as an active reserve to come back into the Marine
Hmm.
Corps.
Okay.
So yeah, right away.
That makes sense. Did you remain a engineer in the reserves, or did you switch to a new role immediately, or a new, what do you call it, MOS or position?
No, I stayed as an engineer. What happened was actually while I was on active duty in 82, and what happened at that time, what was going on in the Middle East and all of that. And they wanted Arabic speakers. My cousin, he encouraged me to go take the test. At that time, I went to take the test, and actually, I was wanted to change my MOS to a linguist before I got out. And then when I went and took the test in Pendleton, I missed two questions on the test. And the staff sergeant that was giving me the test, at that time I was a sergeant, he questioned my integrity and said that I knew what the test looked like. And that's how I missed only two questions. He said nobody gets this test right like this. They always miss like at the least half or
Hmm.
fail. on the first try. And he questioned my integrity. And I'm looking at him and I said, "Look, Staff Sergeant, I'm ashamed of myself that I missed these two questions. I'm native language speaker. What are you talking about?" And that really, really aggravated me. And I said, "You know what? I'm not going to even join them in the intelligence or linguistic." And I left it alone. Then I went on to be stayed as an engineer in the reserve until the first Gulf War.
Okay. So did they had a high demand at that time for Arabic speakers? Is that what happened?
Oh yeah, very high demand. While I'm in the reserve, of course, I picked up staff sergeant. Then I applied and became an engineer maintenance officer as a warrant officer. And then we got activated. I got activated as an engineer maintenance officer, and we went to Yuma, Arizona. My OIC at that time, he was a captain, Captain Black. We were sharing a room, and we were in Yuma, Arizona, getting ready to. We got activated from Michigan, went there, and we were getting ready to deploy to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia. He went and knocked on me. He said to the colonel, he said, "Warrant Officer Farran, he's a Arabic speaker. Every day they have these messages coming out. They want Arabic speakers." And every time, I put in for it, and they put it on the side. But this colonel, he called them up and he said, "We got this guy. He's a native speaker." He did that. I was attached to a unit that I'm not supposed to be talking about. And then all of a sudden, I was overseas by myself as a Arabic speaker.
Oh wow.
Eh,
Just
Yeah.
threw you right into it.
Yep. Yeah. Came back, and when I came back, I tried to get back and get into the intel field. I was promised like, "Hey, you're good. You speak the language good. We want you," and all of that. But Marine Corps intel back then, they were, sorry to say that, they were just not efficient. I said, if they want me that bad, they could have gotten me right away with the recommendations that I had and all of that. So I just left it alone and came back to the reserve unit as an engineer maintenance officer and was enjoying it.
Hmm. So eventually you were kind of affiliated with Defense Intelligence Agency, right? How did that happen? Were they like headhunting, or did you have to go through some sort of application process or something?
We used to get these McCrower letters, Marine Corps Officers, Reserve Officers Association. And I'm looking at one and they're looking for Arabic
Mm-hmm.
speakers at C4I. And I said, "You know what? Okay, I'll give it one more try," and that's it. So I called the CO. He had his number on there, and I called the CO, and he said, "Come on down. I want to interview you, talk to you." And I said, "Okay." So I did. Went down to Washington to headquarters Marine Corps. As soon as we sat down for about 10 minutes, he goes, "You're transferred to me now."
Oh,
I
wow.
said, I could talk, I need to talk to my unit and all of that. He goes, "I will talk to the unit. I'm going to take it up to the general. As of today, you are C4I." I said, "Okay, thank you, sir." And right away, the next drill, he was part of DIA also. So he attached me to DIA. He told him we have one. Working with DIA, it's like night and day with working with Marine Corps intelligence. It's like two different animals. I was assigned to DIA as a translator, interrogator. And we started doing assignments. I started to do assignments within the U.S., interrogating subjects that had come from Iraq. This was like, right after the first Gulf War. That was in like 93, 94.
Hmm.
And so we had a lot of Iraqi dissidents over here. So that was, I was assigned to that unit to debrief them
Wow.
on what, yeah. So it was a very good assignment. I loved it. It was, we were getting a lot of information and for DIA and things that even the other agency couldn't get. That's what
Hmm.
we were told.
Okay.
A lot of what we call SIGs.
So you mentioned interrogate and you mentioned debrief. So these were like voluntary interviews with refugees or something, or were these people like under investigation of some sort?
No, these are not under investigation, but they were like, you cooperate or you go
Oh
back.
wow. Okay.
You know, yeah, something like this.
Yeah, a lot of leverage
So
in that
these,
case.
And yes, we did. And it was all over the United States, because they brought them and they like spread them
Mm,
all over the place.
okay.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, that sounds very exciting and relevant and very useful as well. I'm sure you had a lot of reports to write after that. Was this like based on, what was the situation at the time that you left, like that kind of intelligence you were looking for?
Exactly. And, remember we were getting things like some of the underground comms, blow of money and stuff like
Mm,
this.
very useful.
Yeah, it was very, very useful to be able to pinpoint things and relays and stuff like that. It was, like I said, we got a lot of good information from them. Things, like I said, they were coming back. How do you send these reports? And it's like some will say, okay, we know about this, and some were like, okay, we need more of this, we more on this.
Sure.
So it was like, yeah, what we call significant, but it was good work
Oh, I'll bet.
until. Yeah, until one day, my other, a very, very close friend who was a Marine, and then decided the same thing. We're giving him the runaround with becoming an intel. He was also an Arabic speaker, Lebanese. He said, you know what? Heck with the Marine Corps. He jumped and went to the Air Force. He joined the Air Force, and right away they assigned him to DIA. And he was with DIA for like 17 years, all of his military time with DIA. And when he found out I was with different sections, because he was almost doing like the same thing. And then when he found out that I got attached, he used to take me out with him on interviews also, because he was a case officer.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and I would assist him. He said, "You know what? You want a cool job?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Become a defense attaché or assistant defense attaché. As a reserve, you can only be the assistant defense attaché." I said, okay. So I looked that up and I applied for it. And the CO, the colonel, he approved it for me. And I'm like, okay. Normally, you have to be a regular officer. As a warrant officer, he said, I'm going to put you in. You're the first warrant officer, only warrant officer in the Marine Corps that will be an
Oh,
attache.
wow.
Yeah, he put me in, and I went to the course bowling at the DIA center. As I walked into the course, there was a colonel, lieutenant colonel, Army lieutenant colonel, and he looked at me. He goes, "Good morning, Chief." And I said, "Good morning, sir." He goes, "I think you're in the wrong course. The OPSCO course is next door. That's the operation
Hmm.
coordinators. No, these are warrant officers and enlisted." And so when he saw as a warrant officer, I said, "Colonel, two things." He looked at me. Now everybody in the room turned around to see, I'm speaking to the colonel like that. And the lowest rank in that course is major. There are majors, lieutenant colonels, and colonels in that course. And they all turned around to see. I said, "Colonel, two things. Don't call me chief, because that's a Navy rank, either gunner or mister. And second, I said, is this the other Shea course?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Then I'm in the right course."
Oh, wow.
And yeah, plopped down and me and him became real good friends. And, talking about he just came off of, he was the army attaché in Israel. And we started talking about what's going on over there in the region and all of that.
Hmm.
So we became real good friends. And I became an assistant attaché in the reserve. It was one of the best moves I ever made in the Marine Corps, staying attached with DIA until 9/11.
That's incredible. Yeah, one of a kind. So I've had in the past, I've interviewed a cultural attaché from the State Department. But can you talk about what a military attaché or defense attaché's duties are normally?
Yeah, defense attaché is now, back then, the attaché is the military advisor to the ambassador in that embassy. And the attaché represents the Department of Defense to other governments and other military that he helped in that country. So most of the training, some countries have what's called the Office of Military Cooperation. That's the ones they give out the money and the training and the cooperation between them, in the sense of training and money and equipment and all of that. And then you have the attaché. The attaché is the intelligence source. Attaché is a well known as an intelligence officer, but an open intelligence officer. He's not the direct spy on them. we do have them that come in under that, just like the other agency, under other pretenses, and they would be like culture attache or political attache
Hmm.
or whatever. But in a sense, they are covert intelligence officers. But when you first report to the country, and they report you as this is a defense attache, they know you're an intelligence officer, but you are an open intelligence officer. You trade intelligence with the host country, with their military, exchange intelligence. You deal with the military intelligence in that country.
Hmm.
And at that time, at the same time, you're the military advisor to the ambassador. Now things a little bit have changed from what I heard. Now they have what's called, because they had a conflict between seniority on, the OMC side, the Office of Military Cooperations, and the DAO, the Defense Attaché Office of seniorities and stuff. Now they have what's called the SDR, the Senior Defense Rep. It could be from this office or this office, but the intelligence side on the military side is the Defense Attaché
Okay.
Office.
Very cool. That sounds like just an incredibly unique position for you to be in. And as a reservist, how are you utilized out of foreign embassies when you're a reservist and you've got like your businesses back home that you're also running? Like what's the kind of work life balance there?
Well, I was running it smoothly. Despite that, I had my businesses. We had two businesses that I was running at that time. I also worked for the state of Michigan you ready for this, as a social worker.
Hmm.
And yes, for Department of Social Services at that time, I was like a welfare caseworker and then became an audit investigator for welfare fraud. And at the same time, as a Marine Corps Reserve officer assigned to Defense Intelligence Agency. With that position, I used to get a lot of requests to go overseas to, sub for attaches that are going on leave or they have something else to do and all of that. So I used to get assigned to different countries. I was like running around the Gulf and North Africa. I was assigned a couple of times to Algeria. Mainly, I was assigned to Morocco. And Morocco back then, before the coal incident, we used to get a lot of ship visits into Casablanca. And I was the guy in charge of the security and all of that for them.
Hmm.
So every time we had a ship coming into Casablanca, they would call me up and say, "Hey, you need to go down there." Luckily for my job with the state, every time I had orders, they were like, "Okay, you can go." They were very, very nice, very good about it. And the businesses, I would leave them, with my brothers and my sister. They would take care of them because I would only be gone for like 2 or 3 weeks or a month at
Hmm.
a time. So I did a lot of active duty when I got assigned as an attaché. But it was good work. It was a lot of, hard work. And I enjoyed it, and a lot of traveling, meeting a lot of people. It was very productive,
Hmm.
very productive.
Yeah, it sounds just so incredibly unique and really rewarding. That's very impressive. So, a big portion of your book, of course, really talks about your experiences in Yemen. When did you first go there, and why did that become such a kind of a focus for those next few years?
9/11 happens. I was in Lansing, Michigan, training with quality control with the state of Michigan. Like I said, I was an auditor for welfare and welfare fraud. We were in Lansing and training, and we're on our break, and we're looking at the television. What happened? The attack on the Twin Towers. And I'm just shaking my head. And my supervisor, she knows what my job is, not in details, but who I am, because they approve a lot of my
Hmm.
leave, military leave. So as soon as she looked at it, and she looked at me, and then my phone, my cell phone rings, and I'm talking on the phone. I close the phone, and she looked at me and she goes, "You need to go, right?" And I said, "Yes,
Oh
ma'am."
boy.
And yeah, so the next day I was activated. Well, I was ordered to come to Washington D.C. to headquarters Marine Corps to DIA the next day. So September 12th, I arrived in headquarters Marine Corps. I was there for like about almost a month working with what's called the critical desk as the intel officer at Headquarters Marine Corps. Before we know it, I would, during that time, I got my orders, presidential recall to active duty for the global war on terrorism. And I sent that to my, work here. And I said, hey, I don't know how long I'm going to be gone. This is, 1 year orders and it could be extended for more. Then I got my orders from DIA to go to Egypt. And I'm like, oh, great. This is great that I would go to Egypt. And from there, they are working on, the whole region at this time is in chaos. The United States was in chaos. Everything, we're talking, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks after 9/11. You remember the whole United States
Sure.
was in just like, what is going on? What happened? So I had my orders and ready to go 2 days before I'm leaving. The colonel calls me in, my division chief at DIA. He goes, well, my desk officer first calls. He goes, Sam, you need to come in for a bit. The colonel wants to see you. I said, okay, no problem. He's a army colonel. So and I said, hey, give me a heads up. What does the chief want? He goes, we can't discuss. Just come on in. I said, come on, give me a heads up. And it's like, when you come in, you'll find out. I come in, and the colonel, he goes, hey, Sam, come on in. We need to talk. I said, sure, sir. He goes, sit down. We need to talk. I said, I'm not sitting down. The last time you told me to sit down, I ended up in Algeria. So, no. He goes, we changing your orders. I said, nuh-uh. Orders right here. Egypt. Ticket right here. Visa, passport, ready to go tomorrow. He goes, nah. And he goes, the hotbed right now of Al Qaeda is Yemen and Afghanistan. I said, okay, I'm not going to Afghanistan. He goes, no, you're not. You're going to Yemen. And I said, what? Where's that? And I'm looking on the map. Of course, I know where Yemen is. And I'm looking at because he's the division chief of the Middle East. So he's got that big map of the Middle East. And I'm looking at it. Where's that at Yemen? And he goes, we really need you to go there. You know what's going on over there. The attaches over there need you. They got the US coal investigation still going on. Now it is the hotbed of AQ from Osama bin Laden's hometown, home country, and we need you to go there. And I'm like, he said, and he's looking at me. It's like he looks at his shoulder and he looks at me. He goes, you see these eagles? He's pointing to his colonel rank. And I was like, and he goes, you see what's on your shoulders? It's like, okay, all right. I was going to, I was going to Egypt for 6 months. Then me and him brokered a deal. I said, okay, I'll go for 2 months to help out and see what's going on. And if I like it, I'll extend and I'll stay the other 4 months. If I don't like it, I come back and go to Egypt. He goes, deal.
Hmm.
So as I'm walking out, he goes, by the way, and he goes, I bet you're going to love it. He knows that I love the field, to go into these danger zones in the field. So he goes to me, I bet you lunch, you're going to love it. And I said, I'm shaking my head. And I said, we'll see. And I walked away. And you know what happened? A year later, he came to Yemen and collected his lunch.
What was it that you like so much about it? I understand it's the poorest country in the Middle East, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. I arrived there October 15th, a month after 9/11. When we arrived there, the next day, the attache over there, the defense attache, his name was Colonel Newman. He was a former Ranger. He was like about 6'3", 200 and some pounds. This guy was just massive. He took down actually a guy that was trying to stab the ambassador over there at one time on a plane.
Wow.
He took him down. Yeah, Ambassador Bodine. That time she was the ambassador in Yemen, and he took him down on the plane. Big guy, Ranger, good man. And we got there for the first few months. We were trying to collect intelligence on what's going on in the country, who was AQ, sympathizers, supporters, and all of that. And trying to work actually with the intelligence community from the host country, from Yemen. And turned out at that time they had what's called the PSO, the Political Security Organization, who was three-quarters of them AQ sympathizers, and it was very difficult to work with them when trying to get information on this person and this person and this person who we targeted as supporters or sympathizers with AQ. At the same time, here you are in a country that is, most of them at that time sympathizes with AQ and what's going on with that. America and the West hates the Muslims and all of that, and the media that spread all of this. Like I said, the media sometimes all they want to do is work on bad news, nothing good. That's what they strive on,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So the first 3 months, 4 months, we were just trying to collect information and find out who's who. So it was very difficult. Then we started negotiating to do training for them. At that time, the president Ali Abdullah Saleh decided to stand with the US against Al Qaeda. We offered him that we started training counterterrorism training for his special forces to assist the US in combating terrorism in Yemen and going after these bad guys in Yemen.
So there was a lot of progress on that. I mean, did you feel like you were making a difference there in Yemen, you and everyone else at the embassy at the time?
Oh yeah, we didn't have an OMC at that time, Office of Military Cooperation, that to give them the military aid and all of that. So our office was in charge of that too. So I got assigned to be the liaison officer for that training. So, and I had to get the memorandum of understanding between our Department of Defense and their Department of Defense or Ministry of Defense to sign the contract and begin, start training their special forces. They already have the Republican Guard and Special Forces units, but they're not trained to our level. So we were bringing in our special ops guy, our special forces guys come in, SEAL teams, to train and aid in on water
Hmm.
stuff. And so we were bringing them in to start doing the training. So I was the liaison officer for the first training of that for that CTU units. And at first they were like, they want to do it, they don't want to do it. They want to do it, they don't want to do it. They won't even sign the agreement for like about a month going back and forth. And I'm getting calls from the Pentagon, from DIA, hey, get this signed. Finally I told them, the only way to get this signed is that I have to go in what's called the chukat, this leaf that all the Yemenis chew in the afternoon. Here in America, it's considered a class 4, class 5 narcotics. It really doesn't do anything except get you energized. But so I had to go and I had to get a permission from DOD to go and chew cop with the Minister of Defense and the Chief of
Oh,
Staff
wow.
of the Army. Yeah, to get that, 2 days of chewing cop with them, and I had the contract signed. So, and we began the training. So I'm the guy in between, translator, coordinating all of the logistics and plies and everything, and get these guys into the country and introduce them. And we started the training. That's when I decided that, yes, I want to stay there because that work continued and continued on, and time just kept flying. I went there on a 2 months TDY and ended up 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, to a point where, I not just enjoyed it so much, I felt that I'm making a difference and all of that. Whenever we used to go and sit down with the meetings, with the secure meetings with the Ambassador Edmund Hall, I mean, outstanding statesman. Sometimes we have idiots, but 90% of the times, these ambassadors are just geniuses on how to deal with countries. So, but this man, we would sit down at the weekly meetings. So Sanaa, the embassy over there, became what we call essential personnel only. So limited. If your job is not needed over there, you're not supposed to be
Right.
there. So we had like skeleton crew. And so every time we were there, and he felt the danger that we are all in over there. So every meeting, every week, it's like to the staff over there, it's like, if you don't feel comfortable being here in Yemen and you want to leave, just say so, and we'll try to replace you. And I'd raise my hand, and he'll say, Sam, if anything, you'll be the last one to leave this embassy. You'll be the one taking the flag down. And I'm like, thank you, sir. That's a lot of, either confidence or punishment that you want me to stay there to be the last one. He left before I did, but he gave instructions to the Marine security guards over there, to the MSG. When my time came, 3 years after when I left the embassy there, he gave instructions that on my last day there, that they will take the flag down, fold it, and give it to me.
Oh, wow. Nice.
It is an
Hmm.
honor. I have that flag. Yes, they did that.
Fantastic.
And they gave me, oh, yeah. It meant a lot to take a flag down from the pole of the embassy and present it to me. It was a great
Hmm.
honor.
That's fantastic. So I know that Yemen was a big focus for you. Basically, what do you say, October 2001 up through 2015? I mean, off and on, of course, but the next like 14 years or so, even after your time with DIA ended, you ended up back there as a contractor later on, didn't you?
Yes. So I left there after 3 years, but going back and forth. I went back finally. I got out of active duty and went back into the reserve, but I was still doing, reserve duty in the Gulf, in Qatar, and Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
And by that time, building a relationship when you're in this, with this kind of community, you build these relationship with companies and all of that, because you're the conduit between our office and what is going on outside with all of these security managers. I used to go to like OSAC meetings, and go to security managers of oil companies, expat companies, and all of that, and attend meetings with them. One, to share what we have, because they're all expats. They're looking after their people. At the same time, most of the information that we have, what's going on outside and on the streets, comes from them, because they have people on the streets also reporting to them what's going on. So that, it worked both ways. And so during that time, I built a lot of relationship, and instead of coming back here to work, I retired. I submit my retirement from the state and said, I'm done working here. And I stayed out there working several different companies, security companies, as a consultant. I worked for a couple of years in Saudi Arabia, about 3 years in Doha, Qatar, with a private company, training their intelligence, security intelligence apparatus. And at the same time, what's called, it's a private company started with, you ready for this? Giuliani.
Rudy Giuliani. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was his company. He had a lucrative, beautiful contract with the Qataris to train their intelligence
Hmm.
service. And
Did
yeah,
not know that.
and then, yeah, and then he decided not to take. There was a backlash at the Qataris being sympathizers to Al Qaeda and supported terrorism and all of that, when he was running for president at that time. And they wanted him to come up and say, hey, they're not. And we're training their intelligence service to combat this stuff. Except he wouldn't do anything. So the emir at that time, just the current emir, who was the crown prince, and he was in charge of the internal security and an intelligence service, got pissed off and took away the contract and gave it to the guy that was running the show there.
Hmm.
But yeah, yeah, worked for him, worked for Rudy for about a year, and then worked for the Sofan group there for a couple of years before I decided to go back to Yemen to work for several companies, security companies over there. And that was back in, yeah, 2009. middle of 2009, I decided to go back to Yemen and work with several companies.
Okay, yeah, there was a lot of different contracting opportunities everywhere, and I can imagine by this point your resume is just stellar. For basically anything in any part of that region, I would imagine.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Good. So
Uh,
were things? I mean, this is what, over a decade, nearly. Were things going downhill in Yemen at that time, like political security situation? Like, how had things changed over that period of 10 years or so?
Yeah, as you recall, the Arab Spring when it first started in 2010,
Hmm.
11. Yeah, so, a lot of things started to change over there and the people coming out in the streets and all of that. So did in Yemen, all of the people over there. But in Yemen, you want to say it was controlled. The president Ali Abdullah Saleh at that time allowed it to happen, but it was controlled. There's a fine line when you get to it. The opposition, his opposition in parliament, that was led by at that time his name was Sheikh Hussein Al Ahmar, Abdullah Al Ahmar. In Yemen, the politics over there is so not, I don't want to say fragile, but a little bit complex. Okay, you have the president who is in control of the government and what in international affairs and everything, and you have the parliament who is led by the sheikh of the tribes in Yemen, and the tribes in Yemen supersedes the government. If like a soldier, okay, if you have a soldier over there carrying arms and wearing the uniform, okay, and he sworn allegiance to defend the country and be part of the government. But if his tribal leader, the sheikh, tells him otherwise, he will do otherwise. His
Hmm.
allegiance to the allegiance to the tribe and to the sheikh is more than to the country and government. So it was complex. So, but there was an understanding between the president and the head of the parliament, or the head of parliament. There was an understanding to maintain the security and to maintain the safety and maintain the status quo in Yemen. In front of their people, they're the check and balances, but they're in cahoots behind the curtains. They maintain the peace, they maintain the security, and they just divide everything between them and control everything. If the sheikh wants an uprise, he has an uprise, okay, and he quiets them down. The government allows them to do a little bit of demonstration and all of that, but there is a fine line that they cannot cross. It's very well controlled between these two people until the Arab Spring, where it started to get a little bit out of hand, and the younger generation people that were tired of the tribal influence and the government corruption. So the younger generation started a little bit of a good uprise.
Okay. Okay, I see. So yeah, just huge developments across the entire region there. And at what point did the Houthis kind of come to the forefront? Because they were just, it seemed like they were just one of several groups in the country. How exactly did they come to the forefront and gain so much power so quickly?
This is a far more complex to understand than just how they became. There were 6 wars against the Houthis by Ali Abdullah Saleh, by the government.
Oh man.
And yeah, and the last one, what happened was Saudi Arabia assisted Ali Abdullah Saleh in the war against the Houthis, simply because the Houthis are financed and influenced by Iran. As soon as you say Iran to Saudi Arabia, it's like, whoa, it's like you're telling them Satan or something. So they were willing to put in 100, I don't want to say 100, I want to say they put in 200% of the war, 200% effort of the war against the Houthis with Ali Abdullah
Hmm.
Saleh. The man was a genius. He had a lot of problems in country, and the only way to resolve it was to turn Saudi Arabia against the Houthis with him, okay, to quell some of what was going on the inside, because Saudi Arabia had a lot of influence on the tribes, on the
Hmm.
tribal side. Yeah, they gave them a lot of, they have a monthly stipend for them, for the tribal leaders, especially in the north. And so they had a lot of influence. And when Ali Abdullah Saleh started to, play games with Saudi Arabia, they wanted to let him know, don't rattle your sword too much. We still control, which they did, control a lot of what's going on in Yemen through the tribal part. He got them to help him out with the war, the sixth war on the Houthis. And that went on for like about 6 months until people were just tired of it. So they announced that they will do a peace between the government and the Houthis. Well, Saudi Arabia said, okay, we're sick and tired of it too. Here's the points. Let the Houthis agree to these points and we'll call a ceasefire. So the Houthis agreed to most of the points except two of them that was related to Saudi Arabia. The protection of the border, no attacks on them from the border. They would not agree to that. And so who steps in and makes the peace deal at that time, who was at odds with Saudi Arabia, is Qatar. So Qatar jumps in, makes the deal. They have a ceasefire and everything is good between the government and the Houthis. But who was very upset about it is Saudi Arabia. Yeah. So they didn't become that strong. The Houthis are only maybe 20%. That's it. What happened was when Ali Abdullah Saleh started to get weak and King Abdullah passed away, and the new king came in, Sulaiman, and his son bin Salman. Okay. A lot of people don't remember, and I try to tell them what happened. I listen to what's going on over there, and I try to tell them at that time, bin Salman, okay, and Salman. Salman was the minister of defense during that war. Okay, he was very, very upset about what happened, how the Qataris came in and did all of this, and he was like, he wants revenge on Yemen. So when he became king, if you look at the time frames, as soon as he became king, not even a month later, he declared war on Yemen because he was just ready to take vengeance of them. King Abdullah wouldn't allow him to do it. So they had these plans ready to go just as soon as he became king.
Wow.
Okay. And yeah, that's exactly what happened. Ali Abdullah Saleh had no choice but to put his hands with the Houthis. And he let the Houthis come into Sanaa. There was no way the Houthis could come into Sanaa, where he controlled the three main points, the entry into Sanaa. And who controls these 3 points? The Republican Guard. And who is the commander of the Republican Guard? The president's son, Ahmed Ali.
Oh my gosh.
There's no way they can come in that fast. But he had no choice but to let in the Houthis to protect them from Saudi Arabia.
My gosh. My God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought
So
it
that's
was
what
brilliant
happened.
tactics or
Yeah.
something, but it
Oh,
wasn't.
no, no,
Yeah.
no. It was no brilliant
Okay.
tactics or nothing. Yeah, the Houthis, you cannot win with them a straight fight in the mountains. They're just real good fighters in the mountains, even though they don't even wear boots. They're wearing slippers. But they are good in the mountains. 6 wars. I was in the ops room on the first Houthi war. That was back in 2002, when the president declared war on the Houthis, the first one, and we were just observers. And I remember they were coming back, and it's like it's very difficult to win a war with them. But strategy wise, to this day, they still have no strategy. They just follow what is, whatever is every day is. Depends, I what I call it, depends on the cod they're chewing for that day.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah, there was no strategy. It was Ali Abdullah Saleh knew that the king is coming to get him off vengeance, so he had no choice but to put his hand with the Houthis and allow them to, come in and take over Sana'a in 2 days. And he controls everything, all the military power that he has. He could wipe them out on the outskirts. But that's what happened.
My gosh.
He had decided the evil, which is the lesser evil. He thought that the Houthis, which they did, they protected him for the first year or so.
So, Sam, you were in Sanaa when they actually rolled in, weren't you? Do I recall that correctly?
The first time they rolled in, I was in Sana'a. Then I left and I took most of the people out of there. I had to go back because we still had some expats in there and it was starting to get worse. The war started, but there was not actual bombardment or airstrikes or anything. From when I got my visa and wanted to go back in, at that time, the governor of Sana'a sent me a message saying, don't come. The situation is getting worse, and if you can get your people out of here, get them out as soon as possible. I related that to several companies that I was doing security consultancy for, and told them, get your people out of there. One of the companies insisted that I go in there to get them out. I did. I said, I'll go in and get them out. Another company insisted on sending somebody in to clean up the office. And I knew what they meant by that. But, there's certain things that you just look the other way. That company was Oceanic. You've heard of
Oh
them?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Transoceanic Development, is that right? Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Well, at that time, they were exposed yet. And I did security consultancy for them and assessment in Mogadishu. And when I went there to do their assessment on their site over there, when you see, I mean, I've worked with the agency several times to know and see what's going on. There's things where you have to look the other way and just do your job and walk.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I did. So, but in Yemen, the operations manager or the logistics manager, who was Scott, they insisted on him going in there to clean up the office. I understood what they mean by that: clean up whatever they have loose, don't leave anything behind. I said, if it's possible for him not to come in because it's getting really dangerous, I'm going in for a couple of days and get most of the people out, which I did, and I will leave. They insisted on him coming in. So he did come in. And when he did, it was my obligation to stay and stay safe with him. I'm not the type that I'm getting paid while it's good and I'm going to run when it shit hits the fan. So my obligation, to make sure that he's okay, I have to take that up. I remember one of the ambassadors one time telling me when I was at the American embassy in Yemen as a consultant, and I was getting ready to leave after a party, and she goes, "No, Sam, you're not leaving. You're still here." And she goes to me, "Your uniform is off as a Marine." And but she goes, "But your obligation is still there to
Hmm.
safeguard." And I'm like, "Wow, yeah, it is, yeah, yeah, I'm not wearing the uniform, but there's still an obligation to safeguard Americans, expats, and whatever. Yeah, we're getting paid for it, but we're getting paid as a military guy. But we're talking about whether in uniform or out of uniform. When you take on an obligation, okay, you have to stick to it." And so I said, I have to stay here and make sure this guy get out of the country okay. And before you know it, we were there for like about 5 6 days, and then the ground war started. Not the ground war, but the air war
Hmm.
started.
So there's bombs being dropped on the city while you're there,
Yes.
and these were Saudi planes, weren't they?
Saudi
Yeah.
planes, yes.
Wow. Okay. So what did
They
that do to your timeline? Were you like, we have to get out now, or were you just hunkering down until it ended, or what?
Oh no, we from sources that were telling me this is not a 2 3 day thing. This is gonna be a long haul to get your butt
Hmm.
out of there. So the American embassy has gone, pulled out like about 3 months before that. Most of the Western embassies pulled out. The UN was still there. So I reached out and started talking to a friend of mine who it happens to be, or who is the Lebanese ambassador. He was still there. The embassy was still there. The Lebanese embassy still open. So I'm talking to the ambassador, and he's telling me that he is arranging tomorrow, the next day, to get on the UN flight, and he will put me down as a Lebanese citizen to get me on that
Hmm.
plane. And I said, okay, that's fine. And the next thing, as I'm talking to him on the phone and we're arranging all of this, that we're to get out. And Scott over there, and he couldn't do anything. He did as much as he can to clean his office. But the bombardment was so bad near his villa that I had him brought over to the villa that I was staying at that belonged to one of my clients. He called me up and he said, Sam, this is the bombardment is heavy. Well, what am I going to do? I said, I send the drivers over there with protection and brought them over. And I said, we're going to just hunger here for a couple of days until we get out of there. And then 2 days later, I'm talking on the phone to the ambassador, and I told him that I have a guest with me that I need to get him out. Also, he said, "Don't worry, we'll get him out on the UN plane. That's the only planes that are able to come into Sanaa right
Hmm.
now. There's no other way to get out of there because Sanaa sits at 2,700, what's called 2,700 meters, which is like about almost 7,000 feet above sea level in the mountains. And to get out of there by sea, you have either Aden or Hodeidah. And there's no way you can go through checkpoints with the Houthis or anybody else to get out
Mm-hmm.
of there. By that time, the Houthis, they're already watching us. They already know who I am. They know all of my movements, which I knew they were watching. And I knew they're watching our movements. And I didn't have at that time. Luckily for me, this time I went in there sanitized that I did not have absolutely nothing on me to even indicate that I'm there working for anything but these two companies to get our people out of there, and that's it. So, under the impression that they are NSB, the National Security Bureau,
Mm-hmm.
okay, which let me take you back just for a minute. How what is the National Security Bureau, NSB? The NSB was created under George Bush's administration and the National Security Advisor at that time, Frances Townsend. She came in, she was the National Security Advisor to President Bush in 2000, 2001, 2002. And she came to Yemen and we created the NSB because remember I told you about the actual intelligence agency, the PSO, the Political Security Organization. Half of them, or more than half, were sympathizers to AQ.
Mm.
So we wanted to create a new intelligence agency that we're gonna support, we're gonna pay for it, we're gonna fund. At the same time, we're gonna try to control, okay, who the agents in there are, that we can get information from them and we give them information who are more to the US than AQ. So we created the NSB at that time. And guess who was on the first meeting to create the NSB?
Oh wow, you were there? Oh
Yeah,
boy.
yeah. So we created the NSB, right? And so when we were uh, when we were in that villa gate, I'm talking to the ambassador. My security outside by the gate knocks on the door, and it's like, Mr. Sam, the NSB here, okay, and they want to come in and inspect the villa. Now I knew they have been doing that with other expat companies who have gone now, that they go in there and check for contraband, pornos, alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
drugs, and stuff like that. So I said, that, okay, they coming on that pretense, and they are the government now. The NSB, they're the government. Okay, the guards that I have and all we train were trained by me and other people to combat terrorism, to combat criminals and stuff like that. But you cannot stand in front of actual government officials now. It's like you can't. We're not gangs to fight police or the national security. So I said, yeah, let them in. So they came in. There was three guys in traditional clothing. All of them had their faces covered. So I figured that they're the NSB officers. They don't want to show who they are. And along with them came in like about a dozen or so of armed guys in our uniform, Marine uniform, carrying M4s. And these are the what's called the counterterrorism unit, which I was the liaison officer to train the first ones. Talking about
Oh
the
my gosh.
ironies
Yeah.
there.
Did you? I mean, you said they had their faces covered. Did you know any of these guys? Did you recognize them or anything at that time?
No, no, at that time didn't
Okay.
recognize them.
Okay.
So as soon as they walked in and they said, "We want to check out the villa, investigate what's here, and we'll be done and leave." And I said, "Okay, no problem. Come on in." As soon as I turned around from them and walking back to the sofa, and I'm still on the phone with the ambassador, coordinating the following day's plan to leave. And the next thing I knew, one of the officers grabs the phone from behind me, grabs it out of my ear, and shuts it off, turns it off completely, and tells me to sit
Oh
down.
man.
Yeah. And I'm like, "What's going on?" He said, "Nothing. That while we're searching the house, you can't talk to nobody. You can't do, just have a seat, and we'll be done in a few minutes." I said, "Okay," but bells started ringing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we know these
Mm-hmm.
tactics. And I sat down. There was another phone on the couch. I tried to hide it, but one of the guys who called themselves Marines over there noticed it and grabbed it before I could hide it between the cushions. And my computer is right there, so they grabbed that too. Scott was sitting at the dining table and he's like shocked and nervous and started shaking. It's like, what the hell is going on? And they told him they closed his computer because he was sending out an email and told him to be quiet and not to say anything. They told me not to talk to each other. And that's when ring bells like this is not just a search. And the next thing they asked me to come and sit across from him at the dining table, put my hands on the table, and they told him put your hands in front of you on the table. And they had two guys guarding us while they searched the whole villa. At that time, there was a what's called a safe on there. That's where the expats for that company usually put their liquor in there.
Hmm.
So, but I knew it has been emptied. I have the combo for the safe. But and then they came and said, "Do you have the combo for the safe?" I said, "Nope, I don't have it." And I said, "The only person that has the combo for the safe is the country manager." And they said, "You sure you don't have it?" I said, "I'm sure." The reason I said, "Let me call them and I'll get the combo for you." I needed something to call somebody,
Mm-hmm.
let them know what's going on here. But they were too smart for that and they wouldn't let me
Mm-hmm.
call. They hauled the safe and they wouldn't let me call. And I wouldn't give them the combo. I told them I don't have the combo, but I can get it for you. But they wouldn't do that. So the next thing I see them hauling out all of my security cameras. So they collected the computers, the monitors, and everything else that was around the house. And then I asked them, "What are you taking this?" And they said, "We're just going to take it to headquarters, take a look at it, and we return everything back." That's when I knew it was more serious than just searching for contraband.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting across from Scott. I could see him sweating and shaking, and I can understand his anxiety. And so every time I try to say something to him, I would get butt headed by one of the Marines with the M4, and I'm looking at him, and it's like, you call yourself a Marine, you don't know what the hell it means to be a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at him and say, "Wow, here's our M4s." Looking at him, it's like our uniforms, our weapons, our training, and here it is backfiring on me. So it went on for like about, I want to say about an hour or so. They came and they found I carry a pistol over there. They took that away from me and says, "You're a foreigner. You're not allowed to be carrying a pistol." But I showed them I had a permit. Over there, they issue a permit. I had a permit to carry a pistol and even an AK-47 and 5 guards with me that are armed. Everything legal. Well, to me, it's legal. To them, it depends on who's running the show that day.
Right. Right.
Seriously, that's how it works. We will come up with their own interpretation of the law. Depends on who's doing it. One time I went up against a private at the airport and a colonel. a colonel could not override the private's word just because he's running the show over there at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it works. So I said, okay, no problem. And the next thing I knew, they asked me to come outside and they want to do a search on the around the perimeter, surrounding perimeter of the villa. I said, go ahead. He said, no, we want you to come along. As soon as they said that, real quick to Scott, I said, Scott, be careful. What's about to happen is not normal. You may be going for a ride.
Mm.
I felt it. And as soon as we walked outside, the next thing I knew, we're walking, and the next thing I knew, I was bagged from behind, put my arms up, and put shackles on them, not regular handcuffs, talking about these steel shackles. And I said, what the hell is going on? What's going on? And that's when they started to get rough. And it's like they just grabbed me and shoved me in one of the vehicles that was in front of me, which was a Toyota Land Cruiser, looked like it was an armored one. And they shoved me in that. And that's when the adventure began.
Mm. That's certainly one way of putting it. Did you anticipate that this could ever happen in Yemen? I mean, all the amount of time that you had spent there before, had you prepared for this kind of thing in any way?
Well, to know that this was going to happen in Yemen every single day, you're in an environment that very fluid. You don't know who your enemy is. I always had security. Most of the time, I want to say I had security. Most other times, I felt safe. But to know that would happen, yes, I did. To prepare for it, depends on who's coming after you. I didn't think at that time that they were going to do it, the NSB. You're always looking, it's either going to be AQ or ISIS or criminals that are going to do that, or even tribals that would going to come and kidnap you for money or for power or for a favor. I investigated before there tribal kidnappings just to get work, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And where they send you, this is funny, where they send kidnappers, they send their demands, okay, and a number to where they can be reached to discuss these demands. I had a friend who was an FBI agent that worked also there, and one time I sent it to him. He goes, "Man, I wish all the kidnapping scenarios here in the U.S. would be like that.
Hmm.
Send us a phone number to negotiate
Wow.
the release." But that's how it works over there. So prepared, yes. That's as soon as they shoved me into that vehicle, my training, the SEER training, kicked in, survival. And I said, okay, I know the environment, I know where I'm at, I know the roads, and just concentrate on what's going on, count the minutes, imagine the roads. Luckily for me, it all kicked in. A lot of people who don't have that kind of a training or anything like this, or I know Scott doesn't, but it kicks in. I try to stay calm. Of course, in my mind, I'm staying calm and counting. But at the same time, I'm like yelling, what's going on? Why are you doing this? What did I do? And all of that. But I kept control of my inside of where I'm at, my environment and my location. Okay, we're going down the road. There's three speed bumps. When we get to the main road, they turned right. I know where I'm at. And we kept on going. First runabout, they kept going straight. So they drove around for about 7, 8 minutes, I'm counting. During that time, I was stripped down to my underwear. I was wearing a shirt, jacket, pants, and all of shoes and all that. They were tearing them away from me, not just taking them off. They're ripping them out down to just my underwear. And I imagine they were throwing them all outside just in case there's trackers on
Mm-hmm.
them. So I knew they were going to be doing that. So, and then we got to a runabout, which I can imagine exactly where I'm at, and I know exactly where I'm at. And the next thing I knew, they pulled me out of the Land Cruiser and threw me in a Humvee. How do I know the Humvee? Boy, every military guy knows the sound of a Humvee engine. So they threw me in a Humvee, and that Humvee circled that runabout like about 4 or 5 times and then took off. That's where I lost it. The next thing I knew, now this has started like around 7 o'clock in the evening. By that time, it is like around 10 o'clock, 10:30. We arrived at, I imagine, at that time I didn't know where we were arriving. Now I know it was kind of a building. We walked, when they took me and walking, I was barefooted, of course, and walking on rocks and gravel and that. And we went inside the building and they took me into a room, still shackled in my underwear, and they took the hood off for a minute. And I looked around. The three guys that were in the villa, they were there, and they brought my briefcase and they were going through it, and they were going through the computer and all of my stuff, and started to do inventory. And I'm asking, what is going on? Still asking them. And they said, not to worry, you're only going to be here for a couple of hours. You just going to have to answer a couple of questions and you'll be out of here. And I said, okay. It's like, okay, just ask, what is it? He goes, what are you doing here? And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing here? You know exactly what I'm doing here. I'm here, I'm a security consultant. I'm working for these two companies, and I'm just getting the people out of here and I'm leaving. I'm only here for 3, 4 days. They said, no, 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 no. If you want to leave here alive, that's when it turned violent. If you want to leave here alive, tell us, what are you really doing here? Okay. And who are you working for? Is it the CIA or your old agency, your DIA, or who are you working for this time? And
Hmm.
I said, I'm not working for any of these. And they said, no, 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 that's not the right answer. And all of a sudden, they begged me again. And I guess for them to take off their mask, their face. So they begged me again. And the beatings started from behind. They were with both hands on my ears, pressure, concussions.
Oh man.
Yeah. And I'm sitting on, at that time, I'm sitting on the floor in my underwear. And the next thing is boom, boom, started. The interrogation kept on going, the same questions over and over again. And then a good guy would come and he would say, Mr. Sam, we know who you are. We know what you have done in Yemen. We know you all the way back when you were a defense attache, and we know that all the help and the training and all the aid that you brought to Yemen, and we appreciate that. But just tell us, why are you here this time? That's all, and we'll let you go. And I stuck to my answer, and they're not buying it. And it kept on going maybe for like about 3 hours until I lost consciousness. The only thing I remember after that is being dragged to a cell. I couldn't even walk, just being dragged to a cell. The next thing I knew, I was waking up the next morning. Of course, they've taken the handcuffs off, unbagged, and in a cell.
Hmm. So that was your first day, your first night there of many, as it turns out. What were you thinking at the time? Were you thinking that, I need to get through just today, or I need to get through the next hour, or did you think you were perhaps going to never leave that place?
Well, at first I said it was only, a couple of days. The guy who was still there in charge of the NSB is a good friend of mine, or I thought he was a good friend of
Mm-hmm.
mine. He was the deputy director of NSB. He couldn't be the director. He was the president's nephew. The president, because not to show nepotism, he makes him the deputy director, but he makes all the decisions. He
Mm.
runs the show.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and he puts a director that just in the face of, they try to not to show nepotism, which is like a little bit of humor here, but that's how it is. The deputy director of NSB that we selected, the Americans did, and put him in charge. He's working directly with our CIA and directly with them. He's the conduit. He's the equivalent of our national security advisor and the director of the CIA. So he's the guy that he's still there. He's supposed to be in charge. He's a friend of mine. And I said, he's gonna, as soon as he knows that I'm here and all of that, of course they're gonna tell them we bagged him. Of course he knows exactly what is going on. I said to myself, within maybe a day or two, they're gonna just go home. The first 3 days were like every day going for interrogation, coming back on conscience. The first day actually was funny part is when I woke up, I had three cellmates. Now the cell is 180 centimeters, which is like about 6 feet by I want to say by 15 feet. These are cells designed for solitary confinement of one person, but they have grabbed so many people, the Houthis. They were grabbing anybody that they felt suspicious of, whether he is or not, and throw him in there. They took
Mm.
over this prison. And this prison is, be ready for this, this prison is built by us, the agency, to combat and house AQ guys, HVT guys, high value targets. That's what it is designed for. So I'm thinking over there, after I saw the Bill of Rights posted on the steel door, the cell it's a steel door with one opening to give you your meals and whatever, and one little hole up in the corner of the wall on the other side for ventilation. And that's it. There were three other guys in there. And what happens is, as a courtesy over there, when the breakfast comes or the first meal comes and there's a new guy in there, they don't eat until they break bread with a new guy. He breaks the bread. So they were waiting for me to wake up. We started to eat and they introduced themselves to me. Two AQ guys and one was there for counterfeiting. And I'm like, oh, great. With two AQ guys who I was trained people to combat, and now they're my cellmates and won't break bread without me. And and one guy who's in there for counterfeiting. We broke bread and introduced myself. I didn't tell them, my background or anything. Within 3 days, the whole prison knew who I was, that I'm a American military officer and all of that. But I got a message from the HVT guy. There was a high value Al Qaeda that was in there. And I guess the message was that since I'm not a combatant anymore, not to be touched. But still, you're on your toes the whole time because you never know who's in there that does not like you and who might want to take revenge that you were
Hmm.
combating, you were after them, you were trying to kill them. You've killed some of their comrades. So it was intense all the time. Not even one day that would go by or night that I would go to sleep in comfort, knowing most of the guys that are in the same cell with me are
Yeah,
AQ.
Sam, this whole situation,
Yeah,
it was so hard for me to kind of put together in my own mind. It's so upside down. Like you just mentioned, you're being held by guys who were armed and trained and organized and funded by the U.S., and your cellmates are Al Qaeda guys who are watching out for your health and welfare. There, that was a tough one for me to wrap my head around.
yeah, they are. And even one time, this is comical, but there was going around that AQ is gonna come and break these
Mm.
guys out because of the chaos of what is going on and all of that. There's a cell of AQ and Sanaa that is preparing to invade this place to free all of their, especially the HVT guy there, to break them out. And word got to me that if this was to happen and they do all break out, if I wanted to come with them. And I said, hell yeah, I'll come with you.
Hmm.
That was like about 2 months into it, 2 months into it. After like about a couple of weeks, and it looked like this guy ain't gonna do nothing, and nobody's doing anything. And the only messages that I was getting, it's from these guys. It's like, if you ever get out of here, consider it a new birthday because whoever gets in here doesn't leave. The only way he leaves is in a box or a body bag. One of the Americans that was held over there died in a cell that was supposedly, from what I heard, it was across from me. That's after I was released. Two more guys. They were security for the UN. They just took them off the plane in Sanaa and took them. And one of
Oh,
them
wow.
died like about 2 weeks later. Just
Hmm.
couldn't handle it. An American guy. I said, yeah, I believe it because the situation over there, it's not that great. Funny thing is, when the people asking about the food, I did lose in 6 months. I did lose 36 pounds. But the first 2 weeks, the food was not bad at all. The breakfast wasn't that great. It was beans and military bread, and the dinner was peas and military bread. But the lunch was rice and a little piece of either chicken and on Fridays meat. Pretty good, portion. Later, come to find out that 2 weeks, the contract that was being paid by the agency
Oh
for
my
the
God.
catering was still going.
Oh my gosh.
And after 2 weeks, the the catering
Oh my
stopped.
gosh.
So it felt good, and I was telling them that I'm paying for this meal actually.
Wow. Wow.
My
Wow. Wow.
tax dollars at work.
So, Sam, you're talking about,
Yeah.
you're 2 months into it or more at this
So
point. What was going on the home front? Like, were there diplomatic or military efforts to get you and Scott out of there that were not aware of at the time?
we're not aware. There was no military discussions or anything. Later find out my cousin who enlisted me in the Marine Corps, joined the Marine Corps before I did when he left the Marine Corps and joined the agency.
Hmm.
And he was with the agency for 20 plus years. So he knew what was going on because me and him worked on a couple of projects in Yemen when he would come to Yemen working for the agency. And our offices are next to each other. So we would work on a couple of things over there. But he was well aware from day one what was going on. Somebody from their sources on the ground reported that what was happening. And then my mother and my sister and all of that, and my wife, my mom, the first person she called was him. And he said, he acted surprised. He was telling me, it's like, and we're working on it. And so the government was working on it, but through back channels, and private people was working on it through back channels. And my family was working on it on both the American side and the Lebanese side. Maybe we could use our influence or contact in Lebanon. If you've ever heard of the Speaker of Parliament, Speaker Nabi Berri in Lebanon,
Hmm.
he is the most powerful politician in Lebanon. His sister is my uncle's wife. She's my aunt. So they were trying to use that influence with Hezbollah actually to talk to the Houthis to release me. And I guess from what I understood and heard from a couple of people in Lebanon, that Hezbollah could have and would have released me. But they were concerned for my well being from the American side as to why Hezbollah would have him released. So they didn't want to touch it. Thinking about it, maybe they were right. Coming back, and it's like, what is his
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
affiliation with Hezbollah that they would release him? It- yeah. So, but they were working on it on both ends. Backdoor channels, I guess they, after finding out and coming out of there, that the administration was talking with back channels with the Sultan of Oman, and he's the one that secured my release.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it did work out in the end, but it was through a third party, essentially.
Yes, the US will not negotiate with terrorists.
Sure. Sure.
And so, but we always know that backdoor channels
Hmm.
talking to other countries and stuff too, which is very, very, very important. Just like what was going on, I try to get involved in the release of Austin Tice in Syria a few years back. And because we had some couple of people that I know who can back channel with the Syrians, not only with the Syrians, but with the Russians who had influence on there. But over here, they didn't want any part of it, or didn't want to engage in that part. And unfortunately, I went out and met with Austin's mother, and I told her how we have the ability to back channel and find out, at the least find out if he's still alive or not. But the State Department here didn't want us to engage or anything. It's like, oh, they have a handle on it, just like with
Oh,
the
right,
same
right,
thing
right.
with Paul Whelan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just had lunch with him about a month ago. Me and him served together in the same
Huh.
reserve unit.
Huh. That's amazing.
Yeah. So when he came back, I called him up. I talked to his brother a couple of times when he was still over there, and I tell him pass on my regards to him and all of that, and he did. And
Hmm.
when he came out, he's here in Michigan, so we went and had lunch together, shared a little bit of commonalities of being what's
Mm-hmm.
called imprisoned,
Mm-hmm.
falsely imprisoned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Uh,
So they finally secured your release. How did you find out that you were leaving? Was it like all at once, like you're getting out of here today?
yeah. 2 days before my release, they were bringing in new prison uniforms. And all this time, the 6 months I was there, I was wearing a Bermuda shorts, a t-shirt, underwear, and a shirt, and take turns washing them once a week, wearing them. So, and didn't want to get into the what's called the official prison uniform. The reason for that, while I'm wearing them, I always felt there's hope
Mm-hmm.
of getting out of here. If I was to wear that uniform, then I would have become part of that institution, and it was gonna
Mm.
demoralize me even worse. But as long as I'm wearing them civilian clothes, I felt
Mm-hmm.
that there's hope. And even though they've played the what's called the mind games so many times, you're being released. The Red Cross is working on it. This is working on it. And a couple of times, myself and or other people, they would tell them you're being released today, and they would take them out. And in the evening, they'll return them and say, "No, it didn't work out." And there was actually no release, no, but they were playing these mind games, and it just demoralizes you. And a couple of times to some people, they would break down and talk. Going back like when we first started, about a week after we were in there, Scott was in the cell above me, and I was right above me. And so we used to communicate through the pipes. We would wait until the water runs out because the water is like a storage on the roof. And then when that storage tank is empty, we get on the pipes and we start
Oh, wow.
talking to other cells. And sometimes they drain the water purposely so they can talk. And that's how I found out that he was over there. And one day, about a week, they were talking up from up there, telling the guys that were my cellmates, my AQ guys, they were telling them, tell your buddy that Scott over here, he broke down and started going crazy. And they came and took him and he started talking. He's saying, I have information to tell you. I have information to tell you. And he broke down and he started talking. Yeah. That got me into worse situation when he started talking about transoceanic. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Now we know what transoceanic is, a front. And you're the security consultant for them. So you know what's going on. So you are part of it. At the beginning, it was intense interrogation and beatings, saying that I am part of that organization. So I am working for the agency. I am a front.
Hmm.
And so it was really bad.
So what was Transoceanic doing? They were an agency logistics front organization or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
logistics. Yep.
Okay.
Yes. So since I was their consultant, so I am working for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's going to be hard to wriggle out of that one, I guess.
Oh, it was. And I mean, I knew who they were. Like I said, I did
Mm-hmm.
consultancy or an assessment for them in Mogadishu when you watch the activities over there. But I've been in this game on both sides for a long time to know where just look the other way, do your job, and just keep going. And they know my security clearances.
Mm-hmm.
So I had TSSCI security clearances. So they know I know a lot of stuff. So you got to know where it's like, yeah, I don't want to say like they usually say it's not your pay grade. I had a high pay grade, not money wise, but grade.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Look the other way and keep moving. Anyway, back to the uniforms. And so they came and threw the uniform at me and said, get into these uniforms. And I wouldn't. So we got into it, me and the guards, and I wouldn't put the uniforms on. The day of the release, they came and it's like, he goes, what's your shirt size? I said, I'm not getting into these uniforms. He goes, I need your shirt size. I said, no, I'm not giving you no shirt size, no pant size, nothing. But when he goes, I need your shoe size, that's when it hit me. The only time they ever asked for shoe
Hmm.
size is when leaving. And during that 6 months time, we've seen like few people leave who were wrong imprisoned, Yemenis, of course, who was wrongly imprisoned because they were accused by the neighbor or whatever, and they would let them go. And that's when they tell them what's your shoe size to get their slippers. It's like as soon as he said shoe size, I was in the corner, at the far end corner of the cell, right by the makeshift bathroom. I was holding the Quran in my hand. I was reading the Quran at that time. And so ironically, I was right at the verse. I read at the verse in the Quran, the story about Joseph, the prophet Joseph, where he was falsely imprisoned, and the king asked for his relief, or the pharaoh asked for his release from prison. And that was the last verse I read in the Quran. It's, I don't know, the faith, the message. It's
Hmm.
powerful to explain. And I closed the Quran, and then I got up and I gave him my shirt size, the one that I know. My pants size, I told him 34 waist, 30 length in my shirt size, and they went and got them for me. And then they took us outside. They took us out of the cell and they brought Scott. Now, Scott, I have not seen, for the whole time we were there. I saw Scott 2 times out. The first time it was after 120 days of captivity, not seeing the sun or being outside for 120 days. No sun, nothing. And they took us outside and I saw Scott. And then one more time after that, 2 months later. And this one, when they were releasing us, they brought us and we were sitting in the hallway of the prison. But this time we were not in shackles, handcuffs, or blindfolded. Normally, whenever they take us out of the cell, we're blindfolded and shackled. This time we were not. So it was a good sign that we are going to be released. We sat down, me and him, in the hallway, hugged each other, and we started crying and crying. And he's like, is it for real? I said, I don't know. You never know. They've done it before where they said were being released in the
Hmm.
mind games, but this time it felt different. It just felt different. And then I had a beard coming down, and they made me shave it. And they said you have to look good in front of the cameras, not to look that you've been tortured or you look that bad. So we shaved our beards and had a haircut, and we're
Hmm.
trying to look good. Then they brought us our clothes and said, okay, put these clothes on. And that's like one step further of believing you're going to get out. In the back of your mind, the hope is there, but the reality, it isn't. But the steps that are being taken is leading you to believe could be it. This is true. You're leaving. You're finally leaving this place. And we changed clothes. I put that shirt on, and it's like, what the hell? These guys brought me like 3 sizes bigger shirt. I put the pants on, and it's like I can fit another person in here. What the hell? Later to find out that it's me that lost 36 pounds. So the shirt size was right, the pants was right. It was me that
My
shrunk.
gosh. My gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen the picture of you afterwards, and you look very different. Definitely.
Nobody would
Hmm.
recognize who I am. Yeah. And we still sat there, and it's like, is it true or not? We sat there for like about an hour and a half before they came and said, okay, let's go. We're going to the airport. And me and Scott still looking at each other, and it's like we broke down again in tears, and it's like getting tortured, getting beat up, and getting all that. You didn't cry, but you cry out of joy or happiness, it's different. For some reason, it's different. The torture and all of this, I mean, you can handle it. You're trained for it. You're a Marine. You're strong. You're going to hold it. But for some reason, the joy, and I was more happy of the release for Scott more than me because he was still, I don't know why, it felt still my responsibility to get him out of there alive. And so they put us in the car and we were on our way to the airport. And it's like, it's getting closer and closer to freedom. And I asked about my belongings. And the only thing they brought me back was my computer case with my watch and my ring, which I was happy that they returned. It was my boot camp Marine Corps ring. It meant a lot to me. And that was it. I said, well, where's my money? Where's my gun? Where's my computer? Where's my phones? Where's my American passport? They said, well, they're all still locked up. If you want them, we can go back and you can sit there and wait until we fill out the paperwork to release them. And it's like, no, thank you. Keep going.
Yeah, understandable.
I could live without them. And we got to the airport. As soon as we got to the airport, we were greeted by the Omanis. It was an Omani officer and Omani representative from the royal palace, direct representative of the Sultan. And he greeted us and he said, we're taking you home. And it was like the level, do you want to say the level of, is this true? It started at 0. In the hallway, it went up to like 10%, shaving our beards to look good, another 10%, getting the clothes, 10%. I mean, it was rising. Seeing these guys, it rose up, sitting in the lounge, in a VIP lounge where we were at, and just waiting a little bit for them to process us. Of course, we didn't have any passports, so we left. We got on the plane. And we sat on the plane on the tarmac for probably about almost 2 hours. And that was the longest 2 hours ever. And the level of comfort that we are leaving started to drop. We were waiting for another American. His name was Lookman. He was a teacher, English teacher that they also held. They said they were going to release him with us. And we sat there for about 2 hours waiting for him to come on board. And then they come and said, nope, he's not being released. They changed their mind. They don't want to release him. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh shit. And then I saw, two armed Houthis coming up the plane stairs, armed, and me and Scott looked at each other and said, that's it. We're going back. Since they decided they're not going to release the third American, most likely they're going to say, we changed our mind, get these two off. And we're like, oh man, the level just went down and we all almost, like back in tears, but we're like shaking like a leaf on a tree. And it's not the fear that it's not working out, but the fear of you reach to that point, you're on that plane and you're like a couple of 100 knots away from that plane being on the runway and taking off, but you're losing everything right there and then. That level that I'm talking about that reached like 80%, 90%, all they got to do is close them doors and that plane starts rolling, and all of a sudden you see these guys, you get the message that the third guy is not going to be released, and you see these guys coming up the stairs, and that level just drops to 0. All of a sudden, all of your hype and you're talking about what you're going to do. And Scott is happy that we are being released on his mother's birthday. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, these guys, they were talking to the Omani rep. It got a little louder. And then all of a sudden, you see them going down with their arms going up and down. They're upset about something. And the next thing you see, that ladder pulling away from the plane. And it's like we're looking at each other and that ladder is being pulled away in the plane, and that the plane doors closes and you hear the engines turn on. And it's like, I don't know how the kind of feeling to describe.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
But still, we're still on the ground. They can still block that plane and force them to open. So for, the next 10, 15 minutes for the plane to do their checks and get on the runway, and as soon as wheels up, that's when relief hit us. And we hugged each other, and we were crying, actually not for happiness that we are
Mm-hmm.
leaving another American behind, that he was on the plane with us. We felt really, really bad that we know what kind of living conditions he's in, the torture that he's enduring, and all of that. And we just felt really bad that we are leaving an American behind.
Mm-hmm. Understandable. Had you seen him or heard of his story prior to that? Did you know that he was a third American in distress there?
No, we
Oh man.
didn't know. No, no. There was another American. His name was Casey that they brought in. They brought in like a month after we've been there. He was a reporter. And when he first came in, as he was checking in, taking his stuff and all that, and I could hear him, and he was like laughing and joking and this, and then you can't say anything because if you were to say anything, they'll take you out of the cell and beat you up. So
Mm-hmm.
not a sound supposed to come out of that cell, none. So, and we're listening to him, and I heard him. His name is Casey and all that. And about 2 weeks later, and they were taking him to the hospital because he broke his back somehow in the cell. So he was on a stretcher. While he was on a stretcher, his hands and feet were shackled, and they were taking me at that same time. At the same time, taking me to the hospital because at that time I had started to get chest pains, and my AQ cellmates told me to make a big deal and fake a heart attack so they can take you to the hospital too, because they wouldn't give me my medication for a month and a
Oh
half,
wow.
and I had open heart surgery before, and I needed my medication, but they wouldn't give it to me. And even though somebody brought my medication and they wouldn't give it to me, saying that it could be sent by the US or by somebody poison to kill me, so I would not divulge any information. That's how far minded they go. And so, but I said, okay, get me my medication from your pharmacy and all of that. And they would not get it until I started getting the chest pains and feeling weak. And I fainted that day. And they said, it's like, this ain't going to do it. You're going to have to like fake a heart attack. I mean, really. And they started yelling and screaming, this guy is dying. It took them about 2 hours to get me on the same bus, or the same, it was a Humvee actually, on the same Humvee, and took me to the hospital along with Casey. And I try to tell Casey who I am. And so they released Casey like
Hmm.
about a month after his imprisonment because they thought his back was broken. They ain't gonna be able to do nothing for him, and they send them home. Me and Casey, of course, are in contact, but I try to tell them my name, who I am, to let people know that I'm okay. But every time I try to say something, I would get smacked in with a back of the AK-47 or M4, whichever they're carrying at that time, and telling me to be quiet on that vehicle.
Man. Well, I'm glad that Casey was able to get out of there. When you and Scott finally landed, you flew to Oman. You said, how long did it take you to actually get home from there? Like several more stops or medical exams, anything like that before you actually made it back to your family?
No, we were there for 3 days debrief. We were doing the debriefings. We stayed a little bit of cooperation there. They gave us tickets and told us to go home. Took them a day or two to get our passports done
Oh, sure.
at the embassy and welcome, and the debriefing by the started with the FBI because international kidnapping of a US citizen. Then when I got here, debriefed by the agency, by my previous agency. Unfortunately, their main concern was that I did not divulge any information about my dealings with, the agency, with my agency, with which I did not tell them. Of course, took the beatings and made it out.
Hmm. Incredible stuff. Incredible. So you flew just commercial back home? Did you end up touching down in America just with a bunch of other passengers that had no idea what you'd been through then? Oh my
Exactly.
gosh.
Exactly. Yeah. At that time, the Obama administration,
Mm.
I felt that they didn't give a shit. No welcome home, no Oval Office visit,
Oh
not
wow.
even a phone call from him. I'm disappointed not from the Obama administration as much as the Marine Corps. 30 years, retired officer. The only reason I was taken in and getting tortured and all of that is because they would tell
Hmm.
me, because you're a Marine and we know what you did and you know who you are and what you did. So all of this is because of my service to the United States. And then I come home, and the only thing that they were worried about is that I did
Hmm.
not divulge any of information. The Obama administration, nothing. I only got two phone calls from, at that time, my state rep or state senator. She welcomed me home, and my local community. The welcome home that I got from when I got home, I got a motorcycle escort of about 30, 40 guys who are vets from a VFW, a motorcycle club, all of them vets. They
Oh,
came
that's
out to
nice.
the airport and escorted me home. Yeah, it was very, very nice. When you walk around these guys and you see them, they're genuine. They're genuine service people who serve and they care about people. All the other ones, these politicians, whether on the Democratic side or the Republican side, they're all full of shit. I'm sorry to say it. They are. I have
Mm.
absolutely no respect for none of them. None of them. Because none of them, none of them know what it takes to be out there. None of them appreciate any of us being out there. They'll just tell you, thank you for your service. Little do you know that we serve, and it's an honor for us to serve. It's an honor for us to defend this flag and United States of America. But these guys just out for themselves. Politicians out for themselves. And unfortunately, they lead the country, not us.
Wow. So Sam, after all of that, and you made it home, what did you do to? How did you kind of pick up the pieces after everything that you'd been through? Did you ever work again in the Middle East, for example?
Yes, yes. I still, even still now, I do security consultancy for security companies. I still
Oh
have
wow.
assets on the ground, believe it or not, in Yemen. Yeah, we do due diligence. I still do escorts. I just did one last year for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Did an escort for them in Aden. I mean, I'm not there on the ground, but I coordinate it with the assets that I have on the ground. I'm still looking forward to one day going back
Hmm.
to Yemen. You got to understand, the Yemeni people are the most golden hearted people you could ever find. If they do anything wrong to you, it is done by, you want to say, ignorance, not arrogance. The level of education, knowledge, culture that you got to understand, most of them, some of them, I want to say, very well educated, but the upbringing, the traditions that they have and all of this, they are golden hearted. I mean, imagine this, the guy that was interrogating me and beating me, at the same time, he was thanking me for all of the things that I have done for Yemen. Believe it or not, he goes, I know I've known you for 15 years. I've known you when you were defense attaché, and he was one of the first officers that moved over from PSO to the NSB. But to him, it was just because they were trained that way, that no matter what, that an intelligence officer is an intelligence officer until he dies. That's their training or our training. But that's the kind of people they are. I will go back there again, no doubt.
That's amazing. You're a resilient guy, Sam. I can tell.
Thank you. Thanks.
It sounds like you've bounced back in so many ways, and your work continues in the region and all that. Do you have any major future plans other than visiting Yemen again, like any big pivot or starting a new company, anything like that coming up?
About 6 months ago, I was in Egypt and I met up with the Yemeni Minister of State, who happens to be at that time when I was taken in, he was the governor of Sanaa. And he is also a sheikh of a big tribe in Yemen that I met when I was a defense attaché and kept good relationship with him. And actually, he was trying to talk to me into starting a security company in Aden because he feels that the situation within the next year it's gonna return to normal and they're gonna get the Houthis, make peace with the
Hmm.
Houthis and move him back to Sada and all of that. And he wanted, yeah, he said, how about you come and run in the company? My family start to find out, they'll go crazy. But I might take on that challenge. We might take on that challenge.
Wow. Yeah, you haven't backed down from any of these challenging situations yet.
Nope, nope. About a week ago, I'm reading the Commandant of the Marine Corps issued a statement saying that there is no such thing as
Mm-hmm.
former or ex-Marine. Once
Hmm.
a Marine, always a Marine, and that's all to it.
Yep. That's fantastic. Well, Sam, I really appreciate your time here today. This is an incredible story, and I'm so glad that we got to hear it firsthand from you. I mean, most of us cannot imagine the stuff that you've been through, but you've done a great job of laying out everything that you went through and how you bounced back from it as well. For the listeners, if you want to read Sam's book, I picked it up. I read through it myself. And of course, even after this whole discussion, there's so much more to his story that we haven't really had time to get to. So really want to encourage you to pick it up. It's called The Tightening Dark, An American Hostage in Yemen. And it's available now. We'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. Sam, do you have like a social media pages or website or anything like that you want to share with people if they want to follow along?
Yes, I do. I'm on Facebook, Sam Farran. You'll recognize me right away in my uniform. I'm on LinkedIn of the same. If you want to contact me for
Oh,
a
wow.
signed copy also, let me know. Yeah, we'll send you a signed copy from here.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's a rare opportunity for the listeners, honestly, to get one directly from the author and the person who lived it. So yeah, hopefully they'll take you up on it. We'll link up your LinkedIn page and your Facebook page as well in the show notes of this episode.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time, Sam. Thank you so much, and let's stay in touch after this. Okay.
Sure will. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you. And good podcast. I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts and very informative, very enjoyable.
Ah, well, thank
So
you.
to
I
your
do my best, and the
listeners,
listeners
you
are the
are
best.
one of the best ones out there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Sam. Take care.
Thanks. Take care.
If you're interested in more of Spycraft 101, look for my page on Instagram at Spycraft 101. You can also find more great articles on my website, spycraft101.com. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll stick around because there's lots more to come.
Disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The stories and statements expressed herein are experiences and opinions. They may not reflect the views of the host or the production studio. It's okay if you disagree with our content. No piece of media is right for everyone. If you love Spycraft 101, please check us out online, on Instagram, on YouTube, and especially on Patreon. Thank you for listening.